Here we go.
Woo!
So, good morning, Timothy. How
Good
are you
morning,
today?
Maya. Wow, what a lead-in.
Yeah. Did you
I don't need
enjoy
any
it?
coffee after that. My gosh.
Right.
Where
So
did
that's
where did you come up with that? That looks great.
well, I got it from Richard Berger. He made it for us, and this is actually, yeah, his latest piece of work for
Wow.
Japan Earth Insights. Yes,
Wow. So creative.
amazing.
Thank you very much. Yeah. A great beat.
Yeah, a great beat indeed. Thank you. So, today we are going to talk once again about Japanese politics, and Timothy Langley, Chief Executive Officer of Langley Esquire, is with us again. But today, obviously, he is not reporting from Katsuyama. Timothy, where are you reporting from today?
Good morning, Maya. Good morning, everybody. So I sailed across from Katsuyama, where the home port is. I sailed to the Yokohama side of the peninsula on Yokohama, and I'm now at the Urayasu. There's a marina called Verlasis, and I overnighted here. I will do my show today with you, and then I'll sail back to Katsuyama on the Chiba side.
How about that? And then, how
Yeah,
long did it take you to get there?
it's a
Yesterday,
short
or
sail, maybe 3.5 hours. Today, it likely might rain on the way back. When it rains, it has a bit of a deleterious effect on the wind, so it might take us a little bit longer. I'm sailing back with Captain Evan Bukowski.
that's something to look forward to.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Definitely, yes.
So when
So,
you sail across from one peninsula to the other, you have to cross through this major shipping channel in Tokyo Bay. So you're dodging these huge ships that are coming in. I dodged 4 of them yesterday, but they're polite. They see that you're sailing, you know, at an angle from them, and either they turn or they don't want to kill you.
and no, they don't want to be sunk by you either, though.
Yes, tiny Santana. Yes,
Right. So, thank you very much for preparing again for today. And well, we can start, I believe, with
great,
the briefing. Thank you. Let's
great.
go.
Thank you very much, Maya, and good morning to everybody on our LinkedIn audience and also in our clubhouse. There's always something going on in Japanese politics of interest and of great concern to us. We follow it every week on this show, and I'm very happy and just delighted that you've joined us to get a weekly update. I try and do my best to talk about the things that are important to you, that are timely, that are critical to things that will be happening, in the very short term. There are a lot of other things that we could be talking about, but this is for you. This is for for this audience that joins us. So thank you very much. The yen is at a 20-year low, and if you're watching the newspapers and the news, it's being talked about all over the place. The Minister of Finance was in Washington, D.C. this week talking with a group of 20 finance ministers. There's a lot of pressure on the Bank of Japan, Kuroda, to do something about the interest rates. The interest rates are subject to being changed pretty drastically. He's been holding it down to about the inflation rate down to 1.2%. And the reality is just not that. Bankers and people who are watching money flow, trade deficits, are all looking at that as well. And it looks like it's more likely going to be at the 2% or 2.2% inflation. And I think it's actually far worse than that. The yen traded this week. It changed a lot. It started the Monday after our last show at about 126 to the dollar, and it's now trading about, I think on Friday it closed at around 130, and it is likely to go higher because the dynamics are just pointing to that. The cost of fuel and energy resources that Japan needs to import and pay in dollars for that in most instances, and also the amount of goods being exported from Japan and receiving dollars for that. It's the inputs for production It's just a real. It looks like it's a real mess. It looks like I don't know. He's meeting with Yeltsin as well, the Treasury chief in the United States. You can expect some news coming out probably Monday or Tuesday on the Japanese government policy with regard to the yen rate. And also, they've been furiously buying bonds, which is an indicator of what the Japanese government is doing to try and support the current level of the yen. So we'll wait and see how that goes out. This is the worst inflation Japan has had since 1991, and it looks like it could get even worse. So I know everyone's concerned about. The Japanese are particularly concerned, and it's always something that affects the people in the lower income category when this sort of thing happens. It's happening in the United States as well, but Mr. Kishida is at a kind of precipitous time in his administration to actually do something about it. The elections for the upper house are coming up in less than 3 months, maybe just a little bit over. Today is the 24th, and it's on July 10th. So we're getting really close, maybe 8 weeks away. So he's considering a supplemental budget. He's considering giving handouts to people with children. He's also worried about the new economy that he's been talking about. He's had a couple of meetings this last week. He meets every month on his new capitalism issue. Their fifth meeting was on April 12th. They talked about a couple of things that are new to the mix. One of those is the startup community, and the other is kicking off this idea of supporting children who are, disproportionately affected. Maybe they're in a broken family or they're at the poverty level, and coming up with another idea that was actually first suggested by Prime Minister Suga in his term of office for a Ministry of Children. So the new idea, it's a rolled over idea, the Ministry of Children and Parents. It's an amalgamation of several of the desperate parts that are created to help children in different situations. So with regard to education, with regard to bullying, with regard to their economic situation, maybe there's disabled in the family, or maybe they are disabled. And these are handled by various ministries. So they're going to amalgamate those. They've already selected 300 bureaucrats to begin this process. It hasn't been launched yet. It's going under discussion right now. It could be launched this year under the Suga administration, but it just depends on, how the election goes. This is one of those things. It's not quite a trial balloon. It does have great appeal to the Japanese people. It's got the support of Komeito, and it's got a nicer feel to it. It's not just money grubbing politicians. It's giving back to the community and those people who are in need of it. But particularly with the economy headed in the direction that it is right now, they need something. So there are a couple of ideas that are going on, not just the startup community and not just the children and parents agency, but also the supplemental budget. There's a lot of discussion going on there. And when you consider this in light of the election that's coming up, the Kishida administration wants to appeal to the voters to show them that they are concerned with their plight. They are trying to fix the situation. They're trying to do things rather than to exacerbate them. Komeito has been pushing the LDP to launch a supplemental budget, another budget, a large budget, again, to deal with COVID and the stimulus package. The LDP wanted to push that off until after the election because they're focused on the election, obviously. But they've succumbed to the Komeito demand that it be done now, right away, before the election. That debate ended this week. And so that supplemental budget, the moves and the committees and the meetings that will be devoted to that, it's a very enormous issue to be done within 8 weeks, 10 weeks. That's the decision that was made. So you can expect another supplemental budget. It will be in the trillions of yen. Let me see, I had a number here because it was so large I had to write it down. $20 billion. That's about 2.7 trillion yen in the supplemental budget. So you might remember that they just passed a budget and a COVID bill maybe 4 months ago, and that was the largest in history, and they're still kind of living off of that, but they're doing yet another one. So this impacts the value of the yen and the inflation rate and that sort of thing. So all of these things are conspiring to be not such a great thing for the prime minister or for this administration. So they're trying to cover it up by doing other things and pushing it off so that we can get through the election. Everybody's going to be in love with the LDP, and then we get into the hard brass tacks of actually paying for it and running the government. So there's a lot going on there. Let's talk a little bit about Russia. You know, Russia is the closest foreign country to Japan. You can see Russia or parts of Russia from northern Hokkaido. The northern territories are considered by Russia to be part of their country. Japan considers it to be disputed territory. But the Russians are there, they've occupied it exclusively, and they have been conducting military tests. We reported on that just briefly last week. I didn't have a whole lot of details on it, but it's become more clear now that they've been running military drills there over the last 2 months. One was a drill involving 3,000 soldiers, Russian soldiers, for artillery and missile defense exercises. And then more recently, earlier in this month, there was 1,000 soldiers for a different kind of test. I forget what kind it was, but artillery testing. And people in northern Hokkaido could see flashes in the sky. They could hear the thunderous roll of artillery going off. And they actually sent a letter to the Prime Minister's office to be conveyed to the embassy that this is causing concern. So you've had some air incursions as well. This is what, it's always a precursor to anything that's a little bit more serious. So it does set people off. I don't know how ominous it is, but it is rather new, especially in light of the fact that the sanctions are being implemented against Russia. And this week, those 8 diplomats, Russian diplomats and trade officials, were expelled. The announcement of their expulsion was announced in our show last week, and they actually got on the buses and left. And when an expulsion occurs, there has to be an underlying reason for that. And in this particular case, the expulsion was anchored on spying. And the reason why it's called spying is because it was intelligence gathering. That was the discussion. I don't know if that's in fact very accurate, because intelligence gathering, that's what embassies do. It doesn't mean that it's nefarious or that it's illegal. You're supposed to, gather intelligence and find out what the deal is. It's like this show here. This is kind of like intelligence gathering. So they had to do this as a consequence of what was going on in the EU and the United States. I think more than 800 Russian diplomats have been expelled throughout the EU and the United States. There has not been a retaliatory response by Moscow yet, and of course, the ambassador Mikhail Garustin was not part of the expulsion. But when they expel a diplomat, they just don't have the diplomat leave. I mean, these people generally are here for 4-year terms. The whole family, the dog, all the furniture, everything goes. So when they're expelled for a long term. So it's very serious. It's very provocative. And in light of that, the Japanese military is wondering how they're going to be able to treat the possibility that the Russians could be forming forces on the Northern Territory Islands at the same time that China is doing something with Taiwan. And in light of that, nobody knows what's going on with North Korea. So there's been some action there, pretty serious action, actually, on the Japanese side. The LDP has promoted a bill. It is under, consideration now will be proposed before the elections on taking Japanese defense spending to 2% of the national budget, the GDP, the gross national product. Currently, it's right at 9.9%, but this last year they made a 10% increase. It was one of the largest in history, and an increase. So the defense portion of the Japanese budget is beginning to grow, but now something's happened, and it's going to expand pretty incredibly. They can't do this all at once. It's like sending aid and weapons to Ukraine. They need it now, and it's in the pipeline. It'll come when it gets there. It's always too late. For Japan to go from 1% of GDP to 2%, it takes a while, and they're planning a 5-year rollout on that. But to say, even at this point, to double the defense spending is really huge. And what that means, it is complementary to other things that have been talked about, promoted by the LDP, but probably with the push of the LDP alone, they can pass it through the Congress. To have capabilities, first strike capabilities or defensive strike capabilities. There's a discussion going on now in the Diet to not call it first strike, but to call it reactive support, which means that once a missile is fired, to go after that strike zone. So they're talking about the language, but the actual implementation of it is basically a first strike. If you feel threatened, the government or the defense agency is allowed to take a preemptive action. And the other part of that is that they will be striking not just the launch capabilities, but also the command and control capabilities, which could include even, the capital city where there is typically command centers. So this is a huge difference from the Japan defense posture that we have grown to accept over the last 40 years. This is a dynamic change. So it's something we need to look at very carefully. And it seems like the Japanese government is going in that direction anyway. And there's a couple of reasons why it needs to do that. The primary one being that the United States is a little bit concerned that should push come to shove in this region, the Japanese government needs to give authorization for the United States to do some of the things in order to fulfill its obligations under the US-Japan alliance. And if the Japanese government needs to get approval for that, it could be just too time consuming and not in enough volume or velocity to save the day, for example. So they're trying to front load that now so the United States has more of a free reign. It doesn't have the negotiation it needs to do with the Japanese government in the event. So you can tell that a lot of smart people are thinking about this forward planning and trying to put those pieces into place. It's very unsettling. I hate to report it to you, but it looks like that's the direction that we are going. The Prime Minister has been really busy, not only on that front, but also on the diplomatic front. He's had 2 visitors just this week, the Swiss Prime Minister and the New Zealand Prime Minister. Both visited Tokyo. They made a lot of chatter about with New Zealand, defense sharing, intelligence sharing, that sort of thing. It's kind of funny because there's not much going on in New Zealand. New Zealand takes a much more of a backseat role in terms of defense and the Quad. They're not a part of the Quad. But the Prime Minister is constantly, even while the Diet is in session, promoting his issues and trying to get Japan integrated into the overall approach, not only with regard to Ukraine, but also with the US-Japan alliance. India is being a little bit difficult here. Japan wanted to have a SDF forces, the self-defense forces plane, land in Mumbai this week and pick up supplies for Ukraine. And that request was denied by India. You would think in relation to the Quad and the discussions that are going on there, that there would be a little bit more of an accommodation, but apparently under Indian policy, A commercial plane could land to pick up these supplies, but not a self-defense forces to provide humanitarian aid to Ukraine. So the situation is complicated. The Quad is to be a bulwark against China. That was the initial idea. But now with Ukraine exploding and the sanctions against Russia, India is a little bit reluctant to be, full-fledged member in this initiative. So it's beginning to show signs. The Prime Minister, his first foreign visit was to India to try and, apply salve to that relationship to kind of get the Prime Minister moving in a more cooperative direction. I don't know how successful he was. So we will see. But there are a lot of things going on. Two submarines, Russian submarines, launched missiles just this last week in the Sea of Japan. It's not as provocative as the North Korea launching those, but it is provocative and it's something unusual. North Korea, probably in, I think Monday or Tuesday is the 110th anniversary of the birth of the founder of the North Korean state, Kim Jong-il. And so there are lots of celebrations, there are parades, they roll out all of their new military wares, their technology, the rockets that they have on these 20-wheeled tractors. But you can anticipate as a consequence of that, there might be a little bit more propaganda action coming out of North Korea this next week, which could mean a launch of another missile. This is, somewhat suggestive of, the Japan desire to have first strike capabilities. They're getting it kind of up to here. They don't want to be intimidated more by North Korea. So in light of all this, Mr. Kishida's approval rating continues to be high. He's seen on the diplomatic front. He's attacking COVID, and also with the booster shots and also the relaxation of the COVID restrictions, the quasi-emergency restrictions, and also the Japanese stance with regard to Russian sanctions. His approval rating has risen, and I think you can pretty much anticipate that it is on a rise. It's on a good momentum, and he's going to be building on that as we approach the elections. So as I said earlier, the creation of the Children and Parents Agency, it looks like that is going to be full guns. It's in discussion right now. It started this last week. About 60 hours of debate will be devoted to it, and then they'll make a motion to create that agency. That is being led by Noda Seiko. She was a candidate for prime minister. She lost to Mr. Kishida. So there's a lot of weight behind that, and I think you're going to see some action probably before the election, because it's a good issue to run an election on. South Korea's president-elect won by a very tiny margin, I think maybe 1.7%. So it was almost 50-50. He won by just a tiny margin. He is more favorably inclined to the United States and Japan than his predecessor was, and also his competitor who lost to him. He takes office on May 10th, but he's already putting together his cabinet. He's sending a delegation to Japan next week. And one of the great things that he's already announced is a relaxation of this kind of insistence on Japan, on the comfort women. You need to do more with that. He's actually said that he acknowledges the 2015 agreement between Japan and South Korea. Japan sent probably $1 billion to Korea to put this issue to sleep, even though they weren't obliged to do that, but to settle that issue. That money was accepted, and 2 years later, it was ignored. That the new prime minister said it doesn't make sense. It didn't incorporate all of the feelings of the people who have been vandalized by Japanese occupation. So you saw that statue of the girl on the bench that made the rounds throughout the world. Very incendiary to to Korea, Japan relations. He's taken a different tune on that. His first phone call was to Joe Biden, and his second was to Mr. Kishida. His first uh, foreign trip will be to Japan. So you can see that the constellation of where his emphasis is going to be, even though he just skimmed through on a popular vote, looks like the thing that the United States wanted the most was Japan and South Korea to be more cooperative to each other, have better trade relations, have better military sharing defense ideas, and that sort of thing. And it looks like that is actually going on. So South Korea and the United States are having military drills this next week in South Korea at the same time that the 110th anniversary of our great leader occurs. So a little bit of tension going on there. Keep your eye open. There might be some movement this next week. You remember the scandal with Moritomo Gakuen? Mr. Abe was implicated in a school that was being created in Osaka. His wife was named as the honorary chairwoman of this school, Moritomo Gakuen. It was one of the big scandals that kind of rocked the Abe administration and just really took a lot of emphasis out of other things that he could be doing. This came largely out of the Ministry of Finance. Land was purchased by this couple below market rates, vastly below market rates. And then when they started to build the school, they started to pad the accounting. And the two individuals, Kagoike, husband and wife team, were indicted. And there was a huge investigation that went on there. 20 individuals in the finance ministry were reprimanded as a consequence of that. There were hearings inside the Diet. A fellow by the name of Sagawa came in from the finance ministry and pretty much towed the line, produced the documents that exculpated the foreign ministry that pushed everything off on these two actors, the Kagoike team. As a consequence of that hearing and that presentation of documents, one of the people on the finance ministry's team killed himself, and his wife has sued Mr. Sagawa and also the Japanese government because she said that the reason why he killed himself was he was pressured to report falsely on these documents. In any event, 4 years ago, the lower court in Osaka found these two people guilty, the Kagoikes, guilty of fraud. They took it to the high court, and the high court just reported this last week, on Friday, I believe, that yes, they are guilty, and yes, they will be punished. They gave them a sentence, both of them, the husband harsher sentence than the wife. And at the same time, the wife of the finance ministry official who killed himself also claimed that she was going to move forward with her suit. So it seems like that sort of story, it happens from time to time. It, there's nothing yet in Mr. Kishida's administration like that. There was nothing in Mr. Suga's administration, but Mr. Abe had 4 or 5 of these that just seemed to dog him, including the one that I think people know the most, which is the Flower View Sakura Mirukai, which still was largely unresolved. So sometimes the guilty go free, and the victims just keep getting victimized. It happens in business, happens in politics, but it's one of those things that when we see it, we like to report on it because it is indicative of, doing business in Japan and how Japan rocks. But not trying to throw stones. We've got things going on in the United States that are far worse than that. Finally, the casino. You remember the casino bill? Having casinos in Japan, it's against the law. You're not supposed to gamble. You can only gamble if you're doing horse racing or pachinko or if it's boats. And those are kind of sacred areas for legitimate gambling because it's run by a couple of friends of old politicians. And that money is dedicated to peace and prosperity, as the public pronouncements on their webpage show. But casino legislation has been passed in Japan, And what they're trying to do is find bidders for building the casino. In the latest round, Wakayama Prefecture has declined. They brought it to a municipal vote. It's been going on for more than 5 years. Wakayama, there are only a couple of places that could potentially support a casino. Wakayama was one of the big ones. It was getting close. They had a municipal vote on Thursday, and of the 40 members to vote, 22 voted against it. So the proposal dies, and it goes to the two remaining competitors, which is Osaka and Nagasaki are the two contenders. Tokyo is not contending. Yokohama is no longer contending. And they need to put this bill in this next week. So their bids go in next week into the government. I think probably Osaka and Nagasaki will submit their bids. The Japanese government will review them. And before the summer, I believe, they will actually announce the bid proposal. They might ask for different concessions, different negotiations on the edges of that. But it looks like the casino bill will attract a casino here in Japan. Once that door is open, people will see how much money it generates, what it does for the economy, and then you're going to see them pop up like mushrooms, is my prediction. That's basically it. There's a lot of other things going on, Maya, but I'd like to wrap it up and see if there's other issues that people want to talk about, or to just be available to Q&A from the audience. Thank you very much. I can hear you.
Thank you, Timothy. Thank you for the briefing. Yes. Looks like I still need a lot of practice, to master this multitasking. So, yes. So, well, please move on to Clubhouse, because some people are still wondering why you sound via my microphone there. So it's a kind of a mystery, and let's solve it.
Okay.
Yes, I'm looking
So
forward to see you on the other
that
side.
means I need to get a computer and film on the computer at the same time that I'm doing on my iPhone. I have to have two devices to do that, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, then we should do that. Sorry, everybody.
Yeah, sorry, but well, we're still managing. So let's try to improve. And thank you. I am sorry that nobody on Clubhouse will be able to see your new mustache. So for that, they will have to move to YouTube and watch the recording later. So see you on the other side.
By the way, thank you, and thank you, Richard Berger, for that great trailer that led into this episode. Really rocking. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, see you.
Okay, see you on the other side.